mostly designing websites, like landing pages and that kind of stuff for, let's say, a local business or a brand. So it's not really product design where you work with developers, but someone, let's say someone starting a business and they're looking for someone to create their first website. Like the answer, like should designers code in that situation? From my perspective, it's like we are kind of live now. This is what I always wanted to say. We are live.
And we're officially live.
We are officially live, exactly. I mean, this is just an experiment.
I'm Tyler.
And I'm Nick.
Welcome to the Design Table Podcast.
Yeah, we're here. And you've been very active on LinkedIn lately. I've noticed. Any strategy or idea behind the sudden activity over there?
I tried to be more purposeful or mindful, just to try to post more. So I made it a personal challenge to start posting at least 5 days a week, so Monday to Friday. It's more just to kind of get my thoughts out. And I also found that it's helpful to kind of, once I've kind of typed the thing out to the world, it sticks with me. So it's like a thought that I've kind of concretized a bit. But actually, one of the posts that got some engagement was one around coding, which I think is a hot topic these days. So it's around, should designers code? So I think from my perspective, so just a bit of context. So when I first started my career in web design, I was a hybrid designer / developer. So I went to school for graphic design, but it was a course that was kind of split in two. So it was half graphic design, learning Adobe Suite, learning like typography, that kind of basic principle. And the second half was like front end, back end development. I actually took it because I just wanted to take the graphic design course, but I ended up loving the second half. So my first job was kind of doing a bit of both. And actually, I worked at the company I first started at was an e-commerce website, and all the designers coded and designed. So part of that process was it was kind of a fun game. The designer who did like the actual mock-ups and design, the other designer would actually code the front end. So it was kind of an interesting exercise because we all know like we're pixel perfect. And if you're handing over your design to someone who's an actual designer, they better make sure that it's on point.
Yeah.
But I think we've, like, that was maybe 15 years ago, if I want to date myself. But now I think we've transitioned to a place where designers have taken on additional responsibilities, and kind of the coding aspect has gone to the wayside. So it's more of that split between designer does more of like the discovery, the research, and the mock-ups, and the engineering team kind of is a full stack. They handle all that responsibility. And then I think that's kind of my context. So, but I think that experience helps me collaborate with the engineering team. So like knowing how things are coded, understanding like their process, I think it helps be mindful, and it kind of eliminates some of that friction between like the design and dev handoff process.
Right.
Chris, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's I a very interesting background, in design. And building websites in Photoshop is what I can recall from my very early days. Well, I think designers, pre-AI. Let's say pre-AI first. I always believe that knowing a bit about code is very helpful. Just earlier this week, I sat down together with a developer, and they have their jargon just like we have, with customer journey, like all the fancy words we're using. So it really helps if you speak their language as well. We were talking about divs and flexbox and padding, margin, like the whole stuff, and I could chip in during the discussion. Like I had a design, they build it, and then we did a review together. And then something was a bit off, and then I could jump in and be like, hey, I think that's because it's on a row. It should be a column and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's very useful to know that side, just the fundamentals, because otherwise it's just you in a room looking at the developer trying to figure out why your design isn't really there. That's a very one-sided conversation. You're just watching. Um, so I think it really helps. And then in today's age with AI, it just accelerates everything. But understanding the fundamentals behind it are still very important. So I think, like for most roles in today's age, most design roles, to be more specific, having an entry level in development is very important for most
Yeah,
roles today. Because there are different roles, of course, but for most roles, it would be very useful.
yeah, I'd agree. Like, I think empathy is at the core of our like designers' skill set. So we're empathetic with within like for building a product, we're understanding our users. We're trying to be empathetic and build the best tools for them. But that same skill set can work internally as well. So beyond just like who we're designing for, like our collaborators as well. So we look at engineering, it's like it's cool. It's not like we have a design and make it work. If there's no like understanding from both sides, there's gonna be a lot of friction there. It's like why isn't look exactly well, there are some constraints here. Let me understand um the barriers on your side, and then we can work together.
Well, yeah, that's very important. You really, while designing, like you really should think about like, am I designing something for likes on Dribble or Instagram or any other place where you can share your work? Or are you part of a team and you want a team to perform and your company to be successful? Because that's a whole different mindset. When you want to have the fanciest button design ever,
Mm.
which looks very real and it has depth to it. Like you're not going to be making any friends in your development team if you're, designing something like it, and also not with your stakeholders because it takes way longer, that kind of stuff. So I think it's very true. Like, your team is kind of your user as well. And we're always preaching about, speak the language of your user, understand your user. It's not only the user of the application or platform you're building. It's everyone around you, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm remembering when I think it's more relevant for the startup world. I think once once you're in a kind of a mature company, and the design system and the code base is kind of there, I think it's easier for you to kind of be a bit disconnected sometimes. And you're kind of just like, okay, we have the skeletal structure of like our system. We know how things are supposed to put together. But I think when you're starting off, especially when you're starting off a new project from net zero, I think I think it's very useful to be very empathetic that way. I'm remembering when I was part of a AI startup. Um, and we had no product whatsoever. We had funny story. We had I'd done mock-ups for this idea, and then my company had pitched it at one of like the Montreal conferences, as if it was already built. So it's always fun and interesting. It's like, oh, we have the greatest, we have we have the greatest and latest AI product, but it's not built yet. um, but like part of being in that startup world is moving really quickly. So there's like you as a designer, you want to make sure that it's looks amazing. We're designing things that look super polished, but we're dealing with constraints. So if you're collaborating with the engineering team, it's like, okay, what code base are you using? At the time, they're using Material UI's front end library. So it's like, okay, if we're going to make something, let's keep that in mind. So inputs are created and transition in specific ways. So let me just make sure that I'm styling on top of that and making it brand, making it look aesthetically pleasing, but working with those constraints. And I found that it was less painful for the engineering team to kind of transfer those designs to code rather quickly because didn't have to kind of Frankenstein the system that they're working with to match the design.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's very interesting because now you're talking mostly about like startups, like early stage, uh,
Mm.
and like a designer can work in so many different places. And I think the question like should designers code really depends on the type of role you have. So now you very clearly explained like startup designer, but you also have, for example, someone mostly designing websites, like landing pages and that kind of stuff
Mhm.
for, let's say, a local business or a brand like this. So it's not really product design where you work with developers, but someone, let's say, someone starting a business and they're looking for someone to create their first website. Like the answer, like should designers code in that situation, from my perspective, is like a full 110% yes, like big time yes. Based
Funny you
also
say
on
that.
well, mostly mostly on experience, because then I say I had someone reach out to me like, hey, I'm looking for a website, and I've seen your portfolio and your work online. Do you have time? Do you want to work together? And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And then most of the leads always at some point said to me, like, and this was like a while ago, like a few years back, can you also build it? And then my answer was like, well, if it's WordPress, then I can, but then not really. If it has to be custom, then you have to do, have use plugins and custom code, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't really the full yes they were looking for. And, you know, coincidence or not, probably it is, or it isn't, I have to say. They didn't pick me, and then I was like, So they always ask this question, can you build it too? I'm like, well, a little bit maybe. And then that lead didn't turn into a project. So I was like, well, I need to up my game here. I need to learn to code, because I always get that question. And that's also the empathy I think you're talking about. Like you have to be aware of the kind of feedback you're getting and what it means, you know? Um, so I learned HTML, and well, I already knew HTML and CSS, but I added Tailwind on top of it, and Webflow. And I'm currently working with someone where I'm using, or they are using, Bootstrap. And like a very big, scary but also fun milestone for me this week is that someone I'm working with asked me to, instead of only designing, also code their landing page, their current one, with all the updates I have, and they are using Laravel. So that's completely new for me. Like I have some PHP experience, but now being on a production side of it, like that's very exciting. So, I'm a designer who's also able to do, the big no code platforms, WordPress, Webflow, and then CSS frameworks with Tailwind and Bootstrap, and now like Laravel. Like, so the the code I can do is the list is growing. So from a contractor or a freelancer perspective, I think it's something you really must do. And then we haven't even discussed AI's part in it, because that's really
I was just
helps
gonna,
too.
I was just gonna ask you because it sounds like, um, I think thinks this as well, but it sounds like you have that great foundation of like HTML and CSS, and you're kind of expanding your skill set. And then when we bring up the subject of AI, which I think is just like another collaborator. So understanding the fundamentals, I'm curious how you leverage AI to kind of fill in those gaps. As I imagine you're not an expert developer, but you're getting there. I think we all are. How does AI bridge the gap for you?
Well, my coding skills are, what I can do is I can take a design and rebuild it in code, like one on one, like exactly the same. But then at some point it has to connect to a backend. It has to do something. Not only backend, but also like animations and JavaScript, to make sure if you click a button, something happens. I'm very limited in that area, and so far, none of my clients have asked me to do that part as well. But I'm sure at some point they will. And that would be a moment where I would use more AI than I am today. It's just because I have to learn how it works. Because the fun thing about AI for me is that it can give you an answer, um, and then you can ask it to explain it to you. Like,
Mhm.
why are like, can you give me like comments line by line what it means and why you're doing it? That for me is very helpful. So that's the learning side, and then the second side is like, I'm not someone to just drop in a Figma file or a screenshot and then have the AI like just try and create it, because it usually doesn't work, especially not if you have like custom design and a bit more like specific things are going on. But when I look at the design, I can see the pattern, like, oh, it's a three column grid, and each part of the grid has flex like two lines and this and that. So I have an AI like start chat setup, or an agent, or whatever you want to call it, where I've trained it to be very specific to my instruction, and then I can just put in like, okay, it's a three column grid with flexbox vertical for each column, and then it gives me like the placeholder code, like all the diffs already there, and I only have to put in the actual content, like that kind of ways to speed up the repetitive work. So that's basically my very long answer to the AI I'm using today. Um, I'm very curious what you think about it. Like, is there anything new, or am I outdated already because it's going so quickly?
I think every week we get outdated. I think it's
Yeah,
hard to keep up. But
that's
I
true.
think I think that's great. I think how we're using it is how I kind of use it as well. Um, it's like it's working with it, in collaboration, and then spitting out something, but giving it, because you have that from the example that you just gave, you have that kind of coding background, so you're able to be kind of very specific and talk the language of code, or
Yeah,
talk the language of a developer.
yeah,
Um, so it gives you exactly what you need. Um, Personally, I use it for just cold starts. If I'm ever like twiddling my thumbs and not able to kind of get something going, I'll kind of jump into a chat GP, a little chat, and kind of kick something off. Um, Something interesting that I do, just because I work on product, is I work on a product that's very data focused. Um, so it's often hard to translate like a mock-up and like how it would kind of display certain metrics depending on like the chart. I mean, whatever, like linear chart, bar, whatever kind of chart we have to kind of spit out. Without some kind of data and reaction, it falls a bit flat, because we're not actually sure how it's going to convey. So what I do sometimes is kind of quickly spin up like a POC, or a proof of concept, and I'll put in the prompt. I'll give it like, I need a tax calculator. It needs to have this context. It's going to have like these input fields and a button, and then this type of graph. And it
right.
actually does a pretty decent job of like a V1, where you're able to kind
Mm,
of take that code, host it somewhere, whether it's like on a code pen, where you can kind of put it client facing, instead of like having your clients go through a Figma prototype. They actually can go and test out an actual coded HTML and CSS,
mm.
um, with some JavaScript, which is great. So it can actually be like it's a real life example of a working prototype, which took maybe 20 minutes of prompting to get it to that level.
Yeah. Do you think that's, if X amount of minutes, like you're saying 20 minutes of prompting, like, does that doesn't sound like much, but also I'm thinking like 20 minutes of trying to get the prompts right could also be like a very taxing, like exhausting 20 minutes. Or is it fun, those 20
It's
minutes?
kind of fun, well, because after a while you get used to like, there's specific ways to craft your prompting. So like you have to be very specific. So like, again, it helps if you have that coding background. So like, I'm giving it prompts like, I would love you to use Tailwind CSS, for example. Use PHP, and then use some HTML. Um, and I need the colors to be X and Y. And I need a chart that looks like this. And also you're able to kind of feed in images as well. So it's like, here's an example of our competitors. This is how they put things together. And it's just about feeding it that context. Sometimes it's off and you have to kind of roll back because it gets very pretty biased, meaning it's hard for it to forget what you've already told it. So if you
Yeah.
feed it something incorrect, it's hard to unlearn what you told it. But once you get good at it, it's essentially if you're just creating a quick POC, it doesn't have to be pretty or super
No, that's
optimal. It
true.
just has to. It's just about um, putting what's in your mind and your imagination down on code and something visual. So you have like, okay, this is kind of the direction I'm going to. Um, just to get over that cold start. Now I can jump into Figma and like, okay, this is how it works. Let me start wireframing and prototyping.
Right. So, very intrigued by all of this because this is not the way I'm working mostly. But I see many people, talk about something similar. And now I can ask you because we're here.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So, the proof of concept you're making. So is that for you to see like how it interacts, like if it feels logical, or is it already for like one or two users to play around with or to show a stakeholder? Like, what's your goal behind the POC?
I think it's just to understand. So in my discovery phase, let's say we're working with our stakeholders and we're trying to fix the specific problem. Um, for me, I'm a very visual person. I assume you are as well. Um, Doing some research and then discover on the problem, I need like a tangible thing to reference.
Right.
Um, so it's like, let me just create like a high level, maybe it's not the what it I end up going to look like, but it's like the thing that I imagine in my head and then how it
Yeah.
might work to fix a user's problem. So initially it's for me just to kind of have something tangible. And in
Right.
my case, it's more specific because we're dealing with data heavy kind of design and that experience. So it's first initially just for me to kind of concretize that in my head. And then number two, if we're ever in a situation where a prototype just is not cutting it, like it's just like it's cool to kind of walk them through, but if it's not reacting in the right way, I think just to not bog down the engineering team because they're always super stacked with like works to be done. So if we can kind of alleviate some of that by just having AI generate like a quick HTML or prototype and then share that with our clients and like, okay, are we on the mark? And we can kind of quickly throw it away and
Mm.
create something new. That's how I've been using it. So I think it's in both
Right.
ways. It's both personally and both client facing, depending on the situation, obviously.
But it doesn't have to exclude the other one. It can be both, of course.
Mm.
And one thing I'm thinking is, in my experience, like when you are showing something to a client, it has to be very specific. Like it has to be
Mhm.
the copy you're using in a prototype. It has to be somewhat realistic, because otherwise, like you have some questions in mind, like how does it interact? Does it work well? Does it feel well? And then all they're saying is like, well, you're using 12 here, but that's not very realistic. It's always 8, like in some sort of context. But uh, is that something you feel like you have to get right as well in a prototype, or can it be a black and white and kind of like not pixel perfect but good enough for clients?
I think that's a good point. I don't know if you find this as well, but um, part of my process is including like our clients, even at the discovery phase. So like doing interviews and but also showing them wireframes and et cetera. I found that it's often really hard to show clients wireframe.
Yeah,
I don't know if you see
very
this as
much.
well. It's black and white. It's gray. It doesn't exactly look like how the product looks. It's more like a digitized sketch of how we imagine the experience
Yeah,
look like. I often find it hard for clients to really picture it because it's not an app. It's just like a picture of something. And then if I don't, to your point, have the right copy, if the data in the data tables don't make sense, then it's always a friction with like, what does it mean when that percentage is here, but it's in the wrong, like it's, it's hard to get past. So I think it has to be decently polished, I'd say. Um, So it's spending that extra time making the colors or represent or close to kind of the final product as possible, even if it's like a prototype. And even if it's not structured the same way, if it looks and feels like an app, then they're more receptive to it.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking, because usually that takes more time to get right without AI. But even with AI, of course it's quicker. I'm mostly curious, like, if is that part of your 20 minutes, like, or like the quick first POC, or do you feel like that's out of scope of the thing you're using AI for?
The colors don't matter to me for the initial concept, but if it's client facing, it's great. You can feed in like brand colors and like what the shadow should be, like you can feed in uh like code like from your app just to see like as a reference point. So there's things you can do to like get, I'd say like 60% there. And I think that 60% is enough to get some decent feedback from your clients.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that makes me want to try it out as well. I'm
I
curious
think,
about the next step, though. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. What?
yeah, I think it's super useful. I was the reason I'm selfishly using AI is because I missed the whole Bitcoin bubble. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to miss the next thing. And I feel like AI is the next thing that's going to be staying. And there's like a quote of AI is not going to replace you. It's the person who leverages AI that will. So I think it's important. Like in our industry, things move super fast, and AI moves super fast. So I think it's important to leverage it and learn it
Yeah.
as it evolves over time.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Like, maybe one quick question about the proof of concept before we dive into the learning of AI and not being replaced. Um, so let's say you're done with the proof of concept, and then you mentioned, like, I'm going back into Figma. But then in Figma, it's like an empty file, mostly, I would say, or just part within your bigger file. Um, do you have something to quickly get the proof of concept design into Figma, or do you have to redraw it from scratch?
Yeah, you generally have to redraw it because it's not based on like, I mean, if you're working at a startup or an agent, like you have your design system, you have your code base, everything, like you have all your files set up as fit a specific way. So there's no way to translate what it spits out. Because you would have to give it a multitude of constraints to get it close. Um,
Right.
but like that POC saved you time in like that ideation phase.
Mhm.
So like I find like the hardest part is like the problem solving, and then like
Mhm.
it's that kind of discovery phase. I think that it's not, if you have a design system in place, I feel like that part's the fastest. Um,
Right.
so if you have the pieces in place, you know how things kind of, you know what the UX structure is, you know what the how the UX experience is. You have those defined already, and to translate a POC to your design files, it's super fine.
Yeah, I think so as well. Especially if you've been at the same company for a while, and you have, with your data example, you have your graph, a title, subtitle, perhaps a button to, view more. Like, that's four components. And then you've tested it in your prototype, just like, okay, this is the way to go. And then it's very easy to just pull in those four components from your assets in Figma, and continue that way. Like, it's not, it's yes, it's an empty file, but it's not 100% fully from scratch, because it's a somewhat design mature file you're working on, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And you've gotten past, like, again, you've gotten past that cold start. You know
Yeah,
what you have to do, and it's just like,
yeah,
just do it.
yeah,
We have all the
yeah. That's very helpful. It's very helpful. Um, yeah, I'm gonna play around with that a bit myself as well. All right. So then, you mentioned, AI is not going to replace you, but a UI. Oh, sorry, a UI. Look at me being all all addicted to UI and design stuff. An AI proficient designer is going to replace you. Um, but I'm also thinking, Like now we have the startup designer, we have the web designer slash freelance designer. It's all yes, they need AI. Have you seen any fields or roles or company types where AI is less hyped or used, or is it just across the board? The answer is a yes.
I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be adopted. Well, it just depends on the industry. So like, how AI savvy are they? But I think even the less sophisticated companies are gonna start adopting some AI. Like especially if you just want to like if you're low headcount and you need to get more done and you don't have the budget to kind of hire more individuals in the company, I think you can automate some of the low hanging fruit. Um, and I think it's the idea that like we're the managers of the AI, and then we have that context, so we know how to kind of automate like the that low hanging fruit.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
for example, like if you're a plumber, none of the actual tactical stuff, the things you have to do on a day-to-day basis is AI related. However, um, if you want to, for example, source a part, you can just give it a quick snapshot with your phone and say, "Can you kind of source this replacement part for me in my local area?" And it'll do it for you. So
Yeah,
it's not part of the job, but it's a piece of it. Um, and also, if you want to automate your lead generation, so someone reached out, um, having follow-ups, automating your calendar, that part. So even in that example, if you would say they're less sophisticated, but like the actual job is more hands-on, some of the other stuff around the job can be automated.
yeah, that's true. At the same time, whenever I have questions about AI, or when I'm less hyped than your average person, I always feel like I'm like this old person stuck in you know how things were done 50 years ago. So now, being aware of this, my next question is like, I'm not sure if people are actually going to feel comfortable with AI purchasing stuff for them. You mentioned like you need this part for your business, but you've also seen people be like, well, it's going to book my whole vacation. Like, I personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable with some agent spending my money, not knowing for sure it's going to be the right one, because it does make mistakes. Like for me, it's a bit of uh, there's not enough trust yet. So, I'm always still checking. And that's what we're doing with the proof of concept and the coding as well. Like, you have to be able to see if it's correct, yes or no. And if you can, it's a big productivity enhancer. But I'm not sure if it's
Yeah,
going to be fully autonomous and doing things on its own, especially not with finances.
I don't think
I'm
so.
not
I
sure,
think
but
probably not. And like you'll notice, like even using all these ChatGPT and all these other tools, it's never 100% accurate, 100% accurate, maybe 80% accurate, if that. So there's always a check. And I think it circles back to that should designers code thing. It's like it spits up something out, but if you have a base level understanding of how things should work and put together, you can find the mistakes that it generates and
yeah,
correct it for them.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Even my biggest, like last year, my biggest concern was the whole privacy part. Back in back in 2024, 2023, I worked with a high tech company with with lots of IP and that kind of stuff. And then they were like, "Well, we're not going to feed all our IPs into this black box, and we don't know where it stays and where it goes." But even now, you're seeing a lot of like local AIs, and I
Mm.
think that's a good one. That's really helpful. Um, so that's a big plus for sure. And maybe at some point we all have an AI local on our machine, and then I think when it can't really go out and you're really in control, then it's really going to take away all the boring, repetitive tasks you're doing on your own today. For example, in Figma, um, I spent a few weeks working on certain flows, and then at some point I was like, okay, now we agree on this certain like small bit, like what it should look like, what it should work, how it should work. Um, I turn it into a component to be, more efficient in the future. But I have a few weeks of like design debt, of frames where the component isn't there, and then I would have to go to each frame, replace the whole like custom thing with the component. Like that's something I would love an AI to be able to work on. Like just find this thing, everywhere it looks like this, and I want it to be replaced with this component.
I think you
I
have
think that
yourself
would be a massive,
a feature
massive help.
request.
Yeah.
I think
Or I
you have a
should
feature request to send to Figma or create it yourself.
create it yourself. Yeah. Well, I think, that's, I was saying it and I was thinking the same thing as what you're now saying. Like, hey, you should create it yourself, because that's the day and age we're in as well with AI, especially as designers, like we being creative people and having empathy and being aware of problems around us. Like, you can create your POC, but it's, one step beyond, and see if you can create something that would solve your problem. And then if so, like, it's never been easier to, have a weekend project out the door and see if it gains any traction or perhaps even makes you money.
It bridges the gap, I think, for sure. Like if you lack a skill set, it could alleviate some of the things that you don't know, which I think that's where things might be going. Maybe that's my hot take, is that eventually we're all going to be CEOs or product managers, because some of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis could be automated. And then we're left with the strategy, which is the interesting part of the business, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Also kind of scary, because do you need so many strategy people? I don't think so. You
Probably
don't
not.
need everyone. No. But it's probably going to be okay. And I'm also thinking, but I don't really have any grandparents anymore, to ask them. Like, AI is like this big shift, something new that's really going to make a lot of changes. Like, but it's not the first big thing that will make lots of changes. Like you also had like the personal computer, the calculator, the internet, that kind of stuff. Um, I'm curious if, what the sentiment was back in those days. Like, were people afraid of the computer? Were people afraid of the internet? Like, because now, you see people say a lot about it on the internet. Like, no, well, the computer came and everyone was like, help, but now we're still here. But we don't really know. We should just ask. Like, we could ask our parents or whatever. Like, hey, how was that for you? So I don't think it's. Yeah, we don't
Uh,
really have to be afraid, I think.
I don't think so. Um, and we don't have to adopt it if we don't want to. I know my grandmother, she went on vacation this last month, and we're trying to get her to use her cell phone. That's a new thing for her. So
Mm.
um, we installed WhatsApp on her phone, just so she can give us some video calls while she's there. But when she went up this year, the person who usually connects her phone to the Wi-Fi wasn't there this year.
Mm.
So that task was not complete. And she already doesn't want to use her cell phone. She's like, you know what? I'm on vacation. I'm not gonna find someone to connect this for me. I'm fine without it.
Yeah,
So I think it depends who you are if you want to adopt these things.
and she probably will be fine too. Like, she'll survive.
She will. And
You
I
don't need the video call. And same thing goes for work, I guess, because like, there are, not everyone's going to use AI. Some people, some customers, some of your, clients perhaps will be very anti AI. Like, we're doing everything by hand. By, craft is important to us, and blah blah blah, the whole thing. So there's probably going to be a small industry or a niche where you can be all like human made. Like, perhaps that's some sort of seal of approval in the future. I don't know. But I am noticing that I'm using AI more and more. Like, I used to be, not anymore, but I used to be quite skeptical of it. But now I notice that whenever I go somewhere and there's no AI, I'm a bit like, hey, normally I'm way quicker at this, and now I'm a bit annoyed that I have to do it the old school way. So it's slowly creeping into my life, I would say, more and more.
Yeah, I think so. I think for everyone, we just want to get time. Time is so precious. So like if there's things that we can do to kind of free up that time, so we can spend time with our family, spend time with our friends, etc. If we can leverage AI just to outsource that part so we can spend the time where we want to, I think that's helpful as well.
And that's very dreamy, and I'm all for it. Like that's that's the very positive side of it. Uh, I think most companies will be like, okay, we're 10% quicker now because of AI. Let's have everyone do 10% more. You know,
Mm.
that's the risk. You know, what I'm thinking is like I'm not really afraid of AI. I think it's very useful. I'm also not very afraid of designers being more proficient with AI than me. But my main concern would be like business owners and managers who think AI can fully replace us, because it can't.
I don't
But,
think so.
but they have the authority to to distribute budget and that kind of stuff. And then you have to go through a phase where you let them try, and then they fail, and then they come back to you. But like that in between period is probably going to be full of mistakes and perhaps even a scandal or two. Not sure.
Yeah, I think there's gonna be a pendulum swing. People are gonna over adopt AI, but I think to your point, that authenticity part, like that's something tangible that you can feel. Um, Even down to like copywriting, like you'll notice people who are leveraging AI to do like their Instagram posts or LinkedIn Twitter. It all looks the same and it's all structured the same way, and then you lose that personal connection with that individual.
True. Yeah, that's true. I'm I like the personal connection. And I don't know about you, but you can really spot the AI content. Then I'm like, nope, not going to read this. Not, and then it's like it's a yeah, I'm not going to take notes, but it's like, oh, this person uses AI, like very like obviously. Like if it's subtle and if it helps the person, I'm all for it. But if it's just copy paste the output and be done with it, like that's not really an influencer or a content creator I'm very interested in. I think that's a feeling many people have or will have in the future, which is also a good opportunity for us as designers, or for anyone basically, just to stand out with your AI supported output instead of
Yeah,
AI only output.
exactly. So you have that personal touch on it. You can tell that
Yeah.
it feels real.
Yeah, because you have your ideation, then you have drafting, then you have fine tuning. I think AI is very strong and proficient in those first two steps. Like like you've explained, the fresh start, empty canvas, how to get past it. Then a bit of fine tuning and then a bit of drafting. Creating different versions and trying things out. But then in the end, you need to do the human touch and the fine tuning. um, I don't think we will have AI yet for a while that will be able to do that third step as well. Like, and if they do, then we can strategize all we want all day.
There you go.
But we can do it from the beach, I think.
Exactly. I would love that. I would love that.
All right. So, just to answer the question, should designers code? Can be very short. Yes. Right. The answer
I
is
think I'm
yes.
100% yes.
Yeah. 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 In perhaps in a different episode, or like in a follow up to this, we can discuss all the arguments from people against using code as a designer. But that's perhaps for another time. Because I think that would really level up our super cool new podcast. Like to also take, this is what people say who are against, and then we can perhaps learn from it while being in an episode. But that's maybe a future teaser, like for episode 100 or whatever.
There you
But
go.
for now, yeah. Any closing thoughts about coding for designers?
Yeah, I think you don't, I think the take is that you don't have to become a developer, but I think it's back to that empathy part. If you learn how your collaborators do their thing, whether it's engineering, whether it's sales, whether it's customer success, and you're collaborating, it's good to understand their point of view and their process so that you can properly work together versus just it being a shouting match. So I think um, learning the frameworks or at least the theory around coding is super helpful. Do you have to code like a developer? No. Should you learn how to do it just for that empathy part? I think so.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. My thing I want to say here, I'm not sure if many people say it, but I think it's a lot of fun to do a bit of coding. It's
It is.
it's the ones and zeros, making it work. Step one, and then after trying to optimize it and for performance, and especially seeing your design come to life, on a website and on a platform or in an app. It's a lot of fun to do. So to anyone listening, don't be afraid of it. It's not annoying homework from back in school. It's a lot of fun to learn a bit of coding, in my perspective, at least. I think it's something we should all do a little bit more of. I mean, doing
Absolutely.
more fun stuff is a good thing always.
It is. Yeah, I remember what like before we head off, like I remember when I was that hybrid designer and developer, when I was able to code something I designed and then just hit push, like,
Yeah,
hey, I did that.
yeah, exactly. That's a nice
Not to
feeling.
say that not to say that collaborating with our engineering team and having them code it is not fun as well, but like there's something satisfactory of like, hey,
Yeah,
I dreamt it, I designed it, and then it's out in the wild and some people are using it.
it's alive. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I mean. It's good we're on the same page on that, and I think that's also a good segue to our next episode. In 2 weeks' time, where we will have a very open chat about just our day to day. Like, it's no influencer, middle of the road type generated post, with your, the takeaways we all already know and see 100 times on LinkedIn and social media. But it's just two designers talking about their actual work during the week, and there will be a bit of design to code discussed as well, because that's something I'm doing more and more these days. So I think that's a good part two, perhaps, of what we're talking about now.
I love it. Looking forward to it. I think I get a chance for our audience to kind of get to know us a bit more at a
Yeah,
deeper level.
yeah, true. Because we in episode one, we never did a real official introduction of ourselves.
We teased it for 3 episodes. They get to see it before.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, so it's going to happen in episode 5, I think, because this is 4, and yeah, 5. Well, it's not too bad of a score to introduce yourself in episode 5, I guess. Could be worse.
Could be worse.
Could be worse. Could be 6. Oof. Anyway, um, yeah, that's it for this week, I think.
And on to the next one, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Back
on
on Wednesday.
Wednesdays. Exactly.
Exactly.
On Wednesdays. Cool.